We are back with the first racing video of 2025. Back to LFM and Season 17. Now I completely missed the first week of Season 17, but Week 2 was a good place to start for us as we had sprint races at Imola. With the BMW, it's my favourite car and track combo and a great opportunity to start out the year with some strong results. Now we had some great battles through the week, so let's jump straight into the action for qualifying for race 1. Right, let's jump straight into qualifying for the first race here back in LFM for 2025. Now despite this being my first LFM race, I have been doing some practice at Imola after getting back from summer holidays and doing a race or two with the Sim Cafe guys as well. So it's not like I'm completely fresh here in this stint, but it was a very extremely jet-lagged version of myself doing some practice, so we're going to have to blow some cobwebs out and hopefully get onto pace nice and quick. Now this is my first qualifying run. This is the fast lap from this session. We come up to the hairpin here, turn number 7, and as you can see I've done a 141.7 in a previous lap, and we're looking at about 7/10 up on that lap halfway around here. So we're looking at trying to get into the 1-minute 40s, which would be a really good place to start for the week, considering my best lap around here a 1-minute 40.8. So it's sort of nice to see that that sort of pace is on the cards here for this race. We're coming out of the bowl here, out of turn 12, 13, and up towards the chicane. Now the chicane is where the BMW is really strong, so I'm looking to make a bit of time through this section of the course, and we do a tiny bit up there, so we're still showing that 7/10 coming down to the very last set of corners here, and just flirting there with a 1-minute 41.1 in the predicted. Down here, turn 17, nice and deep through this corner, and trying to get a really good exit out of here, turn 18, on to the front straight, and we're 8/10 up as well. So we are going to go into the 1-minute 40s on the first qualifying session at 20-degree air temperature, so this is a good place to start for us. Showing here in position number 5, and that turns into position number 8 on the start line. So we're hoping for a nice clean race to start the week out with, and a top 10 would be a really good place to start for us as well. However, we do need to deal with turn number 1. We get the green light and we're away. We're on the outside as we approach turn number 1, so we're just trying to go for a nice clean start. There's a bit of a gap already behind, so we're going to try and slot in. However, Aston Martin, he dives down the inside, so we're going to have to go side by side with the McLaren there. We do so nice and cleanly, and I'm able to slot in behind there, maintaining that P8 position through the first set of turns. Coming up towards turns 5 and 6, and again nice and cautious through here with a little bit of a gap behind, so not too much pressure, and that's a really good way to start out this race. All eyes forward now into the next bit. Right, coming up to the hairpin now for lap number 2, and unfortunately I go a little bit too deep into the hairpin, and the Aston Martin behind, he immediately tries to put the nose up the inside. He's got a really good run now as we head up towards turn number 9, and he's going to have a tiny bit of a look, which is a really awkward place to do it. I have to give a little bit of space. We end up running a little bit wide on the exit of that turn, but this Aston Martin is looking really aggressive. Door card number 9, so higher elo than myself. He's really good down here through turn number 12 as well, and out the other side, so there's going to be some real pressure on me as we come up to the chicane now on lap number 2. Like I said during the qualifying run though, the BMW is really strong through the chicane, so we managed to get that one right on this lap, and that opens up a nice little buffer there. And that was a bit of a trend through the races, opening up a little bit of a margin through the chicane on most of the laps that I complete. Coming up towards turn number 1 now, this is lap number 5, and you can see that Aston Martin's still got some pressure on me. I go nice and deep into turn 1, he goes too deep however and gets it all wrong over that curve on turn number 2, and he sails off to the outside, and that then relieves the pressure behind. And for the next part of the race here, we find ourselves in a bit of no man's land. However, the McLaren in front tags the inside wall after the start finishes straight. He does a really good job at keeping the car pointing straight, definitely with some damage there. You see on the replay just a glance, he glances the outside wall there and manages to keep it pointing forward somehow. A really good effort from that driver, and that then means that I'm going to be on about the similar pace. He's obviously not picked up too much damage because his pace continues to be good here with 10 minutes left to go, but he's not able to pull too much of a margin there, so he is my little target to chase for the rest of this race. The Honda there, door card number 5, he makes a mistake into the second to last turn, and that gains us 1 position. However, he does rejoin the track right behind me, and as you can see, a couple laps later, 7.5 minutes left to go, he very quickly gets to the back of me. And although I am very keen to try and keep him behind, it's going to be a tall order to keep such a quick driver behind me through the rest of this race. You can see as we come up to turn number 9, he is right on the rear bumper there, and I'm going to have to try my very best in order to keep him behind. Coming through the chicane, once again, we've got ourselves a little bit of a gap there as we come out of the chicane. It's definitely the BMW strong point, but through the last corner of that lap, however, I make a really big slide, big error out of the last turn, and now that Honda's got a really good run on me, and I decide, for the sake of the rest of my race, just to move over and let him by there, so that's to not cause any more issues for the rest of my race. He slides up the inside there into turn 1. We do not make it difficult for him, but the rest of my race is nice and simple. That Honda actually gets up and by the McLaren there, and we have a nice big 10-second gap to the P9 position behind us. So some good pace, we're all eyes forward, however not quite quick enough to mix it up with the cars in front of us, but we will take a top 10 position in a split 1 race anytime, so a good place to start into the week. So we are into the quick lap here for qualifying for race number 2. As you can see, we are showing purple at the moment on door card number 6, and it's 28-degree temperatures, so a hotter track. And we're on a relatively quick lap here, showing purple, so predicted pole position at the moment with 5 minutes left of the session, coming down into the final sequence of corners, which we get relatively nicely, coming out of the final turn there, showing 6/10 up and a predicted 1 minute 41.14. So really good pace for this particular session. We're going to take it to the line and we're going to gain that 141.16, and it is a provisional pole position and ends up becoming a P4 by only 2/10. So it's going to be a relatively tight race, and the hopes of a solid top 5 position for this one is definitely on the cards. Going to look here for the green light, green, and we are away on race number 2. Once again, I'm on the outside as we approach turn number 1. However, I managed to find myself into a nice little gap behind the 3rd position car. So we're going to go through the racing line for turn 1. Behind me, that Lamborghini gets all over that inside curb, and we're going to have a quick look at that on the replay, because as you can see, we come down to turn 1. He tries to awkwardly stick the nose up the inside through turn 2, but he catches all the curb and fires off into the gravel. However, the gap that was behind is quickly filled by the number 8 Ferrari, and I make a big mistake going into turn number 12, leaving it in 3rd gear for some reason, and that gives that Ferrari a really good run up the hill against me. He's on the outside as we head up to the chicane. However, I hit my braking marker. There's a tiny touch as it begins to turn in. However, we do manage to escape any bad doing and find ourselves holding on to that P4 position after the first lap. But as you can see, those top 3 cars have skipped away a little bit, and the Ferrari, he's right on my tail here, putting some really good pressure on from behind. French driver in that car, Mr. Raffaele, he Twitch streams also, so it was kind of interesting after the race to see it from his perspective. We get ourselves nearly halfway through the race, and there's a change for position for position number 2 ahead, so I have a different target to chase, and I have managed to pull a little bit of a margin on Raffaele in that Ferrari behind as well.
5 minutes to go, and that has no real change to my pursuit of those cars in front. And in fact, it is the Ferrari who begins to close in behind and put the pressure on me once more. I make a mistake into the hairpin there, and straight away he is right on the rear bumper there at 0.3 seconds. So the remainder of this race is going to be all about holding on to this P4 position to that Ferrari behind. Now, interestingly, through the 52 races I've done in LFM, I've only had one race where I've finished in either 4th or 5th position, with about 9 podiums and 1 win. This was actually the sort of position that I really struggled to hold on to in these races. So I was really keen to hold on to this P4, and with the big gap again to P6, I wanted to sort of stamp some authority in a way to prove that holding on to position was something I certainly could do in these LFM races. As you can see through the chicane here though, this is my strong point, and though he was putting pressure on out of turn 12 most laps, going through the chicane relatively well each lap allowed me to gain a couple of tenths each time and take the pressure off as we come through this last sequence of corners. Also, knowing the Ferrari strengths and weaknesses from driving it myself, I knew that a relatively good exit out of the final corner would hold off any issue into turn 1 as well. And as you can see, as we come into the final lap, that sort of sequence of pros and cons of the two cars manages to hold sturdy through the rest of the race here. We get a good run through the first sequence of corners, showing that 0.6 behind, and although once again we come down to turn 12, avoiding a spun lapped car on the inside there, he's not able to mount any more pressure on me through the last part of this race. Getting the chicane right once more on this final lap, and it takes all the pressure off as we head down to that final turn again. So a really nicely handled race from me. In the end, those cars in front skip away to about 4 seconds, although they gained about 3 of those in the first few laps. It was nice to see that a bit of consistency from me later in the race was enough to hold on to them in some way. And you get a nice little reaction from Mr. Raffaele behind. Really nice close race. He definitely had me sweating through that one. It was hard fought 4th position for me. Very happy with the first set of races from LFM in 2025 so far. And you can see the reaction there as well. Definitely breathing hard through that race.
And that moves us on to race number 3. Now, this is going to be a 24-degree temperature race, and at 8 o'clock at night, you can see the sun is going down during this session. And initially with the temperatures, I was expecting a lot more from the session, overdriving the car through the first few laps of qualifying and realizing that the grip wasn't quite in the track, assuming that without the sunlight on the track, it does lower the track grip. Not something I had experienced before or had noticed it so obviously, but as you can see on this particular lap, I really start to put it together, backing it off a tiny bit, gaining a lot of time in the process, 6.5 tenths as we come out of the final corner here, and with door card number 7 on the car, we managed to come across the line and put it provisionally P5 in the session, a 141.36. And that actually holds true through the last 4 minutes of qualifying, and we get to hold on to that P5 position. Now I have Mr. Raffaele next to me in P6, and behind me the Mercedes of Mr. Patton, who is in fact another New Zealander on this grid, so the Kiwi Cup was up for grabs there as we come down to turn number 1. We go side by side with door car number 3 Ferrari there, managing to find some space, and behind me the Mercedes gets in front of the Ferrari through turns 1 and 2. So that Kiwi battle is definitely on now for this race, and I'm going to have to do a good job to keep that Mercedes behind me, noting that his car will have similar strengths to mine through the race. Coming out of the hairpin here, and he's already starting to show the nose up the inside, so I'm going to have to really put the hammer down and try and pull a bit of a gap. And fortunately, after nearly 7 minutes into the race, we managed to do that. As you can see, I've got about 1.5 seconds on the Mercedes behind, and about 3 seconds is to the car in front, still holding on to that P5 position. Come across the line to complete 1 minute 41.7 second lap, so we're starting to get a little bit of pace into this race also.
Pushing on a few more minutes into this race, however, and we're going to pick up another track cut, which is in fact the second track cut of the race. So there's going to be an involving story here of me pushing the limits a bit too hard, and that may come into play later on. Coming down into turn 12 once more, out the other side here, and we're pushing out to 3 seconds now in front of that Mercedes, 5 seconds to the Ferrari in front. However, door car number 3 Ferrari, he does make a big mistake over the chicane, finding the wall on the outside, and we gain 1 position. You see here he gets it all wrong over the first part of the chicane and finds the barrier quite hard, a lot of front end damage to that car. I was unaware of how much damage his car had. This is the start of the next lap, and at this stage I am trying to put as much time as possible into him to try and hold on to this position. As you saw, I made a huge mistake through turns 2 and 3, which was not the best way to start that process. Although by the end of that lap, I obviously recognised that that Ferrari had more damage than I had expected, and as you can see on the timing board as we come out of turns 2 and 3, that the Mercedes actually makes the move on that Ferrari, so the battle that I was having with the Mercedes is going to carry on. Good few minutes have gone by now with 5 minutes left to go, and as you can see I'm coming up towards a backmarker Ferrari, and in the process I pick up my final track warning of the race, 3 of the 3. So I was going to get a very nervous 5 minutes ahead of me to not pick up any more, and being overly cautious following this Ferrari, trying to get to the back of him, I actually was probably too cautious, beginning to lose a lot of time to the Mercedes behind me, and eventually at the start of the next lap I do manage to get by that Ferrari. However, I'd already lost over a second to the Mercedes behind. This next lap was also not particularly good, a mistake into turn 12, not wanting to run wide for track limits, and now Mr. Patton is under a second behind as we come up to this chicane with 3 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. A really poor couple of laps, and I've really started to put pressure on myself, and as you can see here into the last few laps there is a full train of cars behind, so any major mistake is going to cost me very dearly, and obviously and one more track cut will pick me up a 30-second time penalty this late in the race. Coming down to turn 12 once more, and the Mercedes, he's very quick through this part of the track, makes a little mistake there on the last lap, and we just need to get this chicane right and the last few turns and we would be able to hold on to this P4. Fortunately I get the chicane right, and the Mercedes behind's not able to get close enough to really look at a pass into the final turns, and we're able to do our own line into these final corners and to pick up for the second time in 2 races a nice P4 position, once again a bit further away from the podium spots than I would like, but a P4 in this sort of field is always nice to have, and taking the Kiwi win as well, something I don't get to fight for very often in LFM. Right, and time now for qualifying for the last race of the week here at Imola. We're on the fast one now through the chicane, showing 4.5 tenths up. This is a 31 degree temperature race, so it is a hot one, and we're going to have to take some learnings from the previous hot race and bring them into this one. I haven't got the tyre pressures quite right for this qualifying session, but we come through the final corners and we're starting to make a fair bit of time up on our previous P7 lap that is provisional at the moment, and with door card number 8 on the car I was hoping to at least qualify above that in this particular session. We're going to come across the line now to put together a 1 minute 41.9, not exactly a fast time but good enough for P6 provisionally with 2 minutes left to go, and that turns into P7, but as you can see there's 6 tenths to the cars in front and 6 tenths to the next car behind, so I was anticipating a relatively lonely race here at Imola for the final time. Coming up to the start now, we're going to take the green light, and I'm on the inside as we head up to the first set of turns. No one beside me at this point, that yellow Lamborghini not with the same sort of jump as myself. I'm going to follow this Mustang down to turn number 1, get it over the curbs there, and not so good through the second part of the opening corners, running a little bit wide, a little slow on the accelerator, and opening a gap in front, and this yellow Lamborghini behind me putting a little bit of pressure on. However, through the next sequence of corners here, that Lamborghini runs a little bit wide, and that takes the pressure off as we head down to the hairpin, and I find myself in that nice little space that I anticipate to find myself in during this race. A few minutes into this race now, 17 minutes still to go, lap number 5, I find myself not exactly being gapped by those cars in front. I've got behind me the door card number 2 Mercedes, who started a bit out of position, passed a few cars, and is now a second behind me, but I'm pleasantly surprised at how I've been able to hold on to these cars in front. We get up to the chicane now on lap number 5, and there is a bit of drama in front involving the 2 cars that were on the front row of this race, the white McLaren and orange BMW. Is a replay of the incident here. Not enough space given at the apex between those 2 cars, and they tangle over the curbs, taking each other out, giving each other damage, and bringing them back into our little battle pack here. So still 7th at this point, but with the front of the race a bit closer to me, I was keen to get my head down and see what was possible for the last part of this race. I was a little bit concerned by the high ping of some of those cars in front, and as you can see, a disconnect from that BMW in front of me really got me worried. I knew he'd be carrying a little bit of damage from his incident with the white McLaren, so I was worried that if I was going to be involved with him, I was going to have to give him a fair bit of space to avoid a similar contact myself. However, he was able to pull away, so I wasn't going to have to worry about that at this stage. The focus is on this McLaren here, who gets it all wrong going over turns number 5 and 6, and I am able to pick up one position there, moving up to P6 as a result. Half of the race now to go, and we're going to have eyes forward once again on the white McLaren and orange and black BMW. There's a bit of a lunge by the BMW into the chicane. He misses the apex of that second part of the chicane and sails on by. These 2 guys have been going at it all race, and that's certainly going to cause a bit of tension there. You see the McLaren not happy with that move, nor with that BMW not giving that position back. So there's more to unfold in this race between those 2 drivers, and you can see the frustration from the white McLaren. He goes deep into the final set of corners there, and he'll have to really compose himself through the final part of this race. 4.5 minutes to go now. We're still holding on to that P6. The McLaren, the BMW, the other cars in front have definitely skipped away, and we now have this Mercedes-Benz really starting to put some pressure on me through the late part of this race. He's really good down into turns number 12 here. I make a bit of a mistake. I'm pushing a little bit too hard, trying to keep it. You see there, I'm sort of telling myself to just settle down a tiny bit. We come across the chicane here. This has been the stronger part of the track for me. Get a good run through there, and fortunately the Mercedes runs wide and picks up obviously his 4th track cut and a drive-through penalty with a few minutes left in the race. It takes the pressure off. However, he does stay out on track, as he'll be able to finish the race inside the limit and just take a 30-second penalty instead of having to do the drive-through, and he's now trying to get by to make up as much time as possible. I decide that I will do my absolute best to keep him behind as a good opportunity with no pressure to practice some defending. And as you can see now, he coming up to that first turn. I run a little bit deep here, trying to keep him behind. It's not a good exit out of turns 2 through turn 3. And he gets a really good run here. At this point, I give it away. Wouldn't be worth trying to fight him around the outside through this next sequence of corners, considering the penalty that he's about to take and the fact it's the last lap. So it was a good little practice session for me. However, there was no issue at all. I get it all wrong through the last part of the circuit here on the final lap. However, there's no need to worry. I'm currently P7, but I'll get that P6 back from that Mercedes, and it's just a fantastic way to finish out a week of racing at Imola. A nice little step forward in general for me. 4 top 10s, 2 of them top 5, And for me, a job well done for week 1 of my LFM season. And to round the race off, we get to see a final little bump from those 2 drivers who have been at it all race, picking up some further incident points for themselves in the process. Not a great race for everyone, it seems.
And there we have it, my first week of Season 17 in LFM, and a great way to start out 2025. Now, I really enjoyed these midweek races on LFM, and although the release of Evo certainly had some numbers down in these races, it was still great to mix it up with some good drivers, and those top 10 finishes were a lovely feeling for myself. Elo has gone up to 2192, and that's a really nice little jump, as well as maintaining that 9.99 safety rating as well. Considering what Imola can do to safety rating, I was very glad to have some clean races. Now, it only gets better for me as we have Spa on the agenda next week. I really hope that all you out there have had a great start to your LFM seasons as well. Please let me know in the comments how your racing's been going, and I look forward to bringing you some more racing videos very, very soon. Till then, race hard, stay positive. We'll see you again in the next video. Cheers.